Well, let's take a look at what happens inside of your body when blood sugar fluctuates. Well, all right. So let's say we eat a little something, a little naughty. We've all been there before. I've been there before myself. All right. So we're eating something with refined sugars, refined carbs, and this causes your blood sugar to rise rather quickly. So blood sugar goes up. The body in its innate wisdom knows, hey, this is pretty dangerous. For one, you can think of it's an inflammatory state. So think of like a fire coursing through your veins when blood sugar is elevated. Your body is inflamed. Your immune system is under attack. It's got a lot going on. This feeds unhealthy microbes like unhealthy yeast, unhealthy bacteria. So your immune system is going to try to put out those fires. And also at the same time, when blood sugar is high, the immune system has less resources to fight other things that it needs to fight. So anyway, blood sugar is high and your body in its innate wisdom knows this is bad. We have to lower it. So then your pancreas comes online and releases insulin. Blood sugar drops, and then we can see in this chart here how the blood sugar drops, and it will drop down into a point where you are hungry again. And if you notice, your blood sugar passes through this really healthy level of blood sugar, this healthy range. It doesn't hang out, your body won't hang out there when you're doing this type of eating food this way. All right, so when you're in this low range, your body is all of a sudden, hey, I'm hungry again. And what do? You go and grab the quickest thing that you can, and quite often it's going to be high in refined carbs and sugar, and I get it. I used to kind of live in this area, so I understand. But anyway, then your blood sugar is going to shoot up again, and the cycle repeats. And this is like people can experience something called hypoglycemia, where you get blood sugar irregularities. You have to eat something right now. And we can also see type 2 diabetes evolve with recurrent blood sugar fluctuations like this. All right, so when your blood sugar is high and the insulin is released, where does the blood sugar go? Good question. It typically goes in places we don't want it to go. It's the blood sugar will get stored inside of your fat cells, and sometimes your body will go and make some new fat cells. And that can happen because your body says, hey, I got to store this blood sugar somewhere. I will store it somewhere for a rainy day. And so if we're trying to balance out our weight, the last thing we want to do is have this blood sugar bouncing, these blood sugar irregularities where we can't get into like this healthy blood sugar zone. Now, if you look at the bottom of the green bar, the very top of the red hunger, the little hunger loops, that's the prime spot for weight loss. That's like the sweet spot. Blood sugar is in a healthy range, is just getting a little bit low. And at that point, your body can say, hey, we need some energy. We'll go burn some body fat. All right, so let's move on back with blood sugar irregularities. Now, what happens with this insulin when it's released? How does it work? All right, so think of insulin as like a key. So key will lock into the receptor site in your cell and unlock it and open the door so your blood sugar or your glucose can move inside of the cell. And eventually, your cell can only receive so much glucose for energy, and that excess is what then gets stored in fat cells. And over time, if we have too much insulin, the body in its innate wisdom says, hey, this is not healthy. I can't handle this. Eventually, those insulin receptor sites that open up the door to let your glucose in, they start shutting down. And that's a state called insulin resistance. And with insulin resistance, instead of the cells opening up and that glucose going in for energy, they have to go into fat cells for storage. So, what is a fat cell? Well, a fat cell is just stored energy. So does it make sense that if you have extra fat cells that you have fatigue? It kind of doesn't. I mean, that's the body's innate wisdom. It wants to, conserve resources. So what's happening there is the body is storing energy in fat cells, and at the same time, the cells that could use glucose for energy, that with insulin resistance, that glucose cannot get in the cells because the insulin no longer it's resistant. The cell is resistant to insulin. And then lastly, what happens over an extended period of time when we've got this blood sugar bouncing, blood sugar's high, insulin is released, and then it drops, blood sugar drops down, this whole like vicious cycle. We can experience, or people can experience, something called metabolic syndrome. And what metabolic syndrome is where there can be abdominal obesity, high blood pressure. Now, why high blood pressure? Well, remember we talked about the circulatory system being inflamed. It's kind of like fire coursing through your veins when you've got elevated blood sugar. And so what happens then? Well, you can have scarring inside of the circulatory system, and you can have a buildup of lipids and like cholesterol, and that high blood pressure is the result, because the vessel walls are not like soft and supple and still strong at the same time. And then, of course, high triglycerides, and because high triglycerides, their triglycerides are just fat. It's just sugar stored as fat. That's all that is. So if you have high triglycerides, we know that your sugar intake has been too high, and your A1C, when that's elevated, we know that your sugar intake has been too high for a longer period of time, like about 3 months or so. All right. So, and just to recap real quickly, elevated blood sugar causes elevated insulin, and then we'll have a drop in insulin, and you can have that whole vicious cycle. Eventually, your cells can become resistant to insulin, or worse yet, you can end up experiencing like metabolic syndrome with a high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high triglycerides, and cardiovascular disease. We want to change that, and we can.